Welcome to part 2 of this series. And for number 3 in the top 5 best moves of Wijk Aan Zee 2013, we gotta give it to Carlsen. We had to give Carlsen at least one move. He played so many cool moves in this tournament. He sacrificed so many pawns unnecessarily. I can just count it. He did it against Hare Krishna. He had no reason to sacrifice his pawns. He just did it and it was good. He did it against Hu Yifan. He returned an extra pawn just to get a nice initiative, and he did it here against Karyakin. He did it because, maybe not because it was the best move, but it was the best practical chance. And this is what I'm talking about. We got this endgame. Carlsen's white. He's pushing against Karyakin, who has kind of a slightly awkward position. His bishop's not very active. f7 is very weak. Obviously, the bishop on c4 is doing a pretty good job of defending the pawn on d3, attacking f7, keeping the c5 pawn at bay. But yet, how do you break through? How do you win this position? There's no easy way of maneuvering the rook to the 7th rank. He's already tried that, but there was a slight fortress, the bishop being set up on e7 and the king on f8, and there was just no way to break through it. So what does Carlsen play in this position? He went with the move g4. And to be honest, after rook b1, sorry, g4. And to be honest, this one is not something I would have considered. You know, you look at all these moves like f5, e6, try to break through, try to maneuver the rook somehow. Something. g4, you're just giving up a pawn. What's the point of this? He takes h5, and suddenly we kind of come into a realization. There's a very strong threat of h6 check, winning the bishop on f8. There's also a threat of taking on g6, after which black will have to respond by taking with the f pawn, and that gives me a passed e pawn. There is also the fact that if Karyakin were to take on h5, then the move f5 is very difficult to meet. That bishop on f8 is stuck. Look how stuck it is. There is a threat of f6 and e6. There's no way to prevent this kind of maneuvers. The bishop doesn't have any moves. He would like to just teleport to b4 or something and then black's okay, but you can't. It's stuck behind the pawn chain. Here Karyakin didn't see that there is apparently a very interesting draw had he actually just believed in the power of his own pawns and pushed the king forward. And there was some move here like king f5, king g5, and then there's some perpetuation with the rook. I don't care. I really don't care. This is not chess. The computers found it, whatever. I would have never sacrificed the bishop and then sacrificed the pawn on f7 when there's a pawn on f6 almost about the queen. No way. He did what was more human, which was to play rook h1, defending against the main threat of h6, but after pawn takes, Carlsen just showed immaculate technique. Pushed that pawn to victory, and you just gotta see this. Every move that Carlsen plays from now on is extremely precise. Karyakin's position is already very bad. Pawn on g4 is not worth very much. Pawn on c5 is not worth very much. The bishop's restriction on f8 is deadly, and he uses this to full effect. He starts maneuvering a little bit here. He's going to target the pawn on g6, and the pawn on g6 is very, very valuable for black because it's the only way that he's going to stop the pawns on f4 and e5 from just rolling forward. On the other hand, even if the pawn on d3 falls, and it does fall, we'll see how Carlsen can still deal with the pawns on d4 and c5. It's a very big difference in the activity of the bishops. King h6 was played, and although there were maybe more stubborn moves, King h6 looks relatively natural. You give the bishop some scope, and you at least attempt to activate the king. After bishop d5 hitting the rook on h1, Karyakin was forced to check. King g3, check. King g4, and take that pawn on d3. He really needs to at least get some kind of counterplay, but it comes a little bit too slow. The move f5 comes in, hitting the pawn on g6, and the rest of the endgame was just very pretty. King h7, bishop g8, king h8. Notice the difference of the activity of the kings. The pawns are also faster for white. The rest is a mop-up. Carlsen actually only wins this game by one tempo, but it's enough, and once a grandmaster calculates a victory, such as this endgame is actually a victory by a tempo, then the rest is easy. Carlsen shows exactly the winning technique, which is to put the king on d7 and push the pawn forward, and there is no way that black can, on time, put the bishop on a3 and the king on f6. As was followed here, because now White also has the threat of King E8, and once King E8 is done, you want to put your king on G7, but that loses control over the E7 square, and the game is now over. This was the finishing touch, and Carlsen wins a very pretty game in a position that maybe a lot of grandmasters and even super grandmasters would have never even considered a G4. He makes it look like it was a very easy endgame. Now we're going to go through the next one really briefly because we already saw it, but I just have to put it here again. Hare Krishna, what a move. Hare Krishna Vanwelli. The position is very complicated. There's discovered checks everywhere. Vanwelli goes in, rook c1, tries to trade off some pieces, threatens his own checkmate on f1. Time pressure is coming up. There's no discoveries with the knight. Knight d4 doesn't work, knight f4 doesn't work. White starts panicking. What to do? What to do in this position? How do you continue the attack and this move? Rook hf3 was just glorious. Rook defends its own on f1, covers all of the squares on the f-file, threatens moves like rook f8, rook f7, rook f6. As we know, rook f7 was the winning move. The knight on e5 is stuck, defending the pawn on g6, therefore the rook on f3 is taboo. And there are just no good moves for black. There are just no good moves for black. He trades off the rooks after, he should have traded off the rooks, sorry, in this position, but after king h7, rook f7, we saw the very beautiful checkmate that happened, and this is just glorious. I mean, winning a position like this against a player that's almost 2700, it's a good feeling. And as we know, this was a very pretty checkmate, and Vanwelli resigned in this position. But of course, the move of the tournament must go to Anand, Aronian Anand. What a novelty. In this position, which has been seen a few times, actually there was a high-profile game recently featuring Wojtaszek. He played knight g5. Knight g5 was supposed to be a very annoying move, targeting h7. Bishop h2 was supposed to win a pawn but lose the threat of the center. It was unclear what black was supposed to do. And then move c5. Just like, I don't care. Take my pawn on h7, and he does. Aronian does. He goes for it, and he gets massacred. It seems like the knight on h7 is turning that rook. You have to move it, but no. Anand's not going to move that rook. And just the way that this game finishes is wonderful. I mean, the pawn goes to f4. It seems like everything's covered on the king side. Doesn't matter. Pawn takes d4, opening the rook on c8, creating weaknesses all over the board. Just a very cool move. Aronian retakes, and bishop c5. Oh my god, like, just these moves are amazing. Look at this move. Just, it looks like a beginner playing this move. Bishop c5. What is this guy doing? But it's just a huge threat. Had he taken on c5, of course, there are problems with the queen coming to d4, which is the point of the combination. Knight takes c5 is the follow-up. After bishop e2, we'll just see the prettiness come along. Knight e5, defending the knight on g4, opening that queen on d8. White's position is already very bad. Bishop takes intermediate. King h1, knight takes, knight f8, and oh my god! Just when you thought Anand had played every good move in the position, he comes up with f5. Beautiful move. The simple point is that queen h4 would have been a winning idea had White not had the resource queen h7 trading the queens. And because there is no defense for White against queen h4, he decides, oh, I'm going to play f5. You don't have queen h7 anymore. There's nothing you can do about it. Aronian doesn't find any defense, collapses quickly. Knight g6, queen f6 hits the knight. Knight's trapped. h3, doesn't matter, I take it. You can't take on g4. Queen e2, queen h5, queen d3, which was not the best move. And this final tactic, bishop d3, of course. Queen h3's defense is cut off, and queen h3 is a decisive threat, and Aronian resigned. Wonderful game by Anand. I know it was very quick. You should see it with detail, but this was fireworks, and this was very good. In any case, hi everybody. Have a happy Valentine's Day. Hope everybody is enjoying themselves on this wonderful day of friendship and love. And we will be waiting next week for Lisa Orlova's report all the way from icy Iceland, in which we have such a good tournament. We got Anish Giri, Vacharla Graev. So many good players have gone through this tournament. It's just going to be a delight. Thanks for watching. Make sure to email us, leave a Facebook message, or comment on the YouTube video, and we will see you next week.